This story contains adult language and adult subject matter. Discretion is advised. No animals were harmed in the making of this story. This piece of writing is the intellectual property of Shyla Brooks and is copyright protected under U.S. and international copyright laws. Reproduction and distribution of this written work without written permission by the named author is prohibited. Copyright 2023, Brooks, all rights reserved. This story is for James and is dedicated to James's dream. The Beast with Many Names by Shyla Brooks. The high desert city of Albuquerque lay quietly nestled at the base of the Sandia Mountains. The last hour of remaining afternoon sun shined on the Sukia Circuit racing track, located in the western outskirts of Albuquerque. The Sandia Manzano mountain range, towards the east, provided a stunning backdrop to spectators watching the drifting event. The slowly dying sun starting to cast its pink color on the mountain chain. The sun felt warm to the skin, but the cool, crisp feel of the gentle fall breeze caused a chill to run up the plump woman's spine. She pulled her hoodie up to cover her neck. The breeze blew some of the woman's brown hair into her eyes, and she brushed it away from her face with a flick of her wrist. The sandy-colored mutt sitting quietly next to her suddenly sat up and wanted to chase one of the drift cars that sped by the pit area. This caused the woman to lose her balance, and she quickly pulled back on the barely one-year-old puppy's leash as the woman shifted her weight, regaining her balance. "Mira, sit," she told the dog. Mira looked up with her big, golden-brown puppy dog eyes. When human and canine eyes met, the dog knew the human was not playing and sat down. The woman scratched behind the dog's ear and said, "Good girl." "Oh, fuck," the woman heard from the engine bay of the car she stood next to. She peeked over to look at the large man, her husband, bent over tinkering in the engine bay of his drift car. "That didn't sound good," she said, now leaning over the side of the car. "One of my hoses let go because the clamp broke," the man said, now standing at his full height of 6'5". Beads of sweat dripped down his round, handsome face, his short black hair sticking up in a wild mess. He held the broken clamp in his hand, stress on his face. He sighed heavily. "I'll be right back. I'm going to ask around and see if someone has an extra one or if I can borrow one." The woman nodded. "I'll be here," she said, at the same time as she opened the driver's side door and sat down with her legs dangling outside the car. The woman watched as her husband slowly walked over to a pit crew on the other side of the area. Her husband towered over everyone, not just in his height, but also in his general size. She laughed to herself, remembering the first time she had come with him to one of his drift events. She overheard people's comments. "Is that The Rock?" one asked. "Did you see The Rock was here?" another said. If only the woman had thought quickly enough, she could have told them it was her husband and he's not The Rock, but they are in fact cousins. She watched people come and go through the pit area of the drift track. The dog had moved into the shade of the door and sat, alert to all of the movement in the pit area, wanting to chase anything going by. Shyla pulled her phone out of her pocket and checked her messages. Once she finished responding to her two friends, she then went onto social media to kill time until James came back. She finally noticed how hungry she felt and the feeling of needing to pee. She had to wait until James came back because she did not want to deal with taking the dog to the stands to use the bathroom. The thought of concession stand food did not appeal to her, especially since she knew after the drift was over, James would be grilling up some burgers for them. She smiled to herself. Today was the day James' childhood dream would come true. He would finally be drifting his 1980 Toyota Corolla on the actual track of the Sukia circuit. How many years has it been? She asked herself. She knew it had been his lifelong dream to drift his car. His dream began as a small child playing the game Need for Speed 2 Underground. And that started it all. They had been together for 13 years and it had taken James that long to get to this point. The day James gets to drift his car for the first time. James had been practicing drifting on his own for weeks. Today was the day he would do a qualifying drift, with him being the chaser car. He would be chasing his friend Dean. Shyla smiled to herself again and thought, is that anything like being a seeker? And imagined her large husband riding a broomstick and trying to drift it. She chuckled to herself as James came walking back out of breath. Their eyes met, and James gave her a tired smile, but held up a clamp. Mike had an extra one, he said, moving to the front of his car, bending down into the engine bay. Shyla stood up, with their dog in tow, and walked to the front and stood next to James. And here I was going to suggest zip ties as a fix, she said, giggling. They had a running joke between the two of them. Anytime something broke, James used zip ties to fix it. In fact, his bumper and several parts of his car were currently being held together by zip ties. James stopped long enough to give Shyla the stupid look and went back to clamping his hose. After a few moments and some more tinkering, he stood up and stretched, reaching towards the sky. His shirt pulled up, showing his belly, and he pulled his shirt down once his stretch was over. He shooed away one of the last remaining bugs still out this time of year. Shyla pulled a bottle of water from the ice chest and handed it to him. Thank you, he said, and downed half of the bottle. You think the beast is ready? Shyla asked, softly patting the car. I sure hope so, he replied. We'll find out on the track. His lips turned into a large grin. How much longer? She asked. He pulled his phone out to check the time. Half hour, he said in a nervous and excited tone. Shyla could see how much James was holding back his excitement. The big, tall, muscled Hawaiian looked like a large kid, his soft brown eyes beaming with excitement. I need to pee, Shyla said, securing Mira to the car door. She's been a good girl. Free of the dog's leash, she put her hand on James' large, broad shoulder. Soon, my love, soon. Then she made the ee sound as she left for the bathroom. The beast with many names is what James had decided on calling his car. The car, over the years, had been given many names. Putt-Putt, Boost Almighty, Beelzebub, and the Void, to name a few. None of them sounded right. Shyla, on one of the nights where they once again were having the same argument on the car's name, is the one who finally came up with the name for the car. No, it's Putt-Putt, Shyla said, unmoving in her opinion. I like Boost Almighty, James countered. That's fine. You can call it that in your head if you want, but the car will forever be Putt-Putt. James again tried to counter with one of his usual lame counters. All Shyla responded with was, Putt-Putt. The discussion/argument was coming to a natural lull. They both sat in silence, thinking of a way to continue the discussion. As they sat there listening to the music Shyla had started to play on her phone, each thinking of a way to continue the argument, He Is by Ghosts started to play. Suddenly, Shyla exclaimed, That's it! The name! Grinning ear to ear. That's the name of your car! She sat there grinning while she made James wait. He finally had gotten impatient and said, Are you going to tell me? Shyla dropped her cheesy grin and looked at James with a fake, serious look on her face. Maybe. Then she laughed playfully. You ready? She paused dramatically. The Beast with Many Names. James sat quietly, taking in the words Shyla had spoken. After 30 seconds, James started to shake his head yes and smiled. Yes. Yes! He paused. The Beast with Many Names. His eyes lighting up and his smile getting larger by the second. That's it. He leaned over and kissed his wife, knowing he would be totally lost without her, but never admitting it to her. The Beast with Many Names, a Toyota Corolla sedan, hiding a 2JZ motor under the hood, just one of its many secrets. On the outside, it looked like a stock car, but again, secrets. Shyla designed and painted the look of James' car. She had done the paint job herself. Silly James had given her complete freedom to paint the car how she wanted it. While she would ask him his opinion once in a while, he did not get any say beyond that. James had been leery of what his wife had planned for his baby. Yet, in the end, he felt happy and pleased with his wife's choices. The base color of the car, looking at it, was a midnight purple. On further inspection, the paint turned into a metallic purple with hues of blue, green, and yellow, depending on how the light reflected off the car. The name of the car, the beast with many names, with a claw slashing through the letters, was painted on the roof. The letters were a shade of yellow and metallic gold to complement the midnight purple paint job. As an added novelty touch, glow-in-the-dark paint was mixed in, so it would glow under a black light. On the driver's side of the drift car, there was a woman covered in bloody scratches, mouth gaped open, and a silent scream, being chased by a velociraptor, with its stinged fangs snarling at her. Shyla had been cackling to herself the entire time she painted the woman wearing a bikini, being chased by the dinosaur. She amused herself with the way she mocked the typical motif men put on their cars of scantily clad women in sexy poses. When she finally revealed the finished motif on James's car, he laughed out loud. James picked her up and spun her around and set her back on the ground. I like it, he said, bending down to give her a kiss. James and Shyla worked together on restoring the inside of the car. James wanted to keep the upholstery as stock-looking as possible. While the original upholstery was not possible to get, they got as close as they could in making it look like the original color of black and gray. Shyla, of course, added her own unique touch. The bare metal of the roof was left as it was, but Shyla had come in and painted the roof a golden pearlescence, and then had painted each of the cars many names. James, of course, loved this touch. The car is the beast with many names, after all, and all the names needed to be displayed somewhere. James appreciated this woman's touch to his car. All right, James said, taking a deep breath as he pulled into his starting position on the drift track. His friend Dean pulled up next to him in his all-black 1981 Toyota with a 3S GE engine. The two friends looked at each other through the side windows, each with white, toothy grins. They gave each other a thumbs up. Mira, happily and safely strapped into the back seat with her protective custom-made helmet, she happily looked around, excited because she got to go for a fun ride. Shyla, also securely strapped into the passenger side of the car with her own helmet on, checked to make sure she was, in fact, belted in. This would be the first time she would experience drifting at high speed. Can we go back? She yelled above the loud roar of the 2JZ. Nope, just sit back, baby, James yelled back. He began turning on the two cameras he had mounted on the inside of the car and hit the button to start recording on the outside cameras. He secured his phone on the dashboard and hit play. The beginning of Year Zero by Ghost began to play. The best song for the beast with many names to take her first official drift with, he said, his hands moving up to the steering wheel. The man outside on the edge of the track signaled for drivers to get ready. Both drivers revved their engines excitedly to show off a bit. They stared intently, watching the Christmas tree, waiting for the lights to start their countdown to begin. James, his knuckles turned white under his gloved hands from gripping the steering wheel. He felt his excitement and adrenaline mixing inside of him, making him want to explode. He did not have time to explode right now. He had to drift the car. The light turned on and stayed steady on the red. James had to keep reminding himself to breathe. He did not want to pass out before the drift even began. The starter raised his hand up and made a thumbs up. Dean gave him a thumbs up in return, signaling he was set and ready. James likewise gave the thumbs up. He was ready. The starter nodded to the guy controlling the Christmas tree, and both men in their drift cars watched as the first of the 3 amber lights turned on. Then the second, and third. When the light turned green, both men took off, smoke billowing behind them, both gaining speed as quickly as they could. James, full concentration on his driving, started to rock the car back and forth, getting ready to drift around the first turn. He was so focused, he did not hear his wife screaming next to him in terror. Shyla had been in the car a few times when James had practiced drifting, but the speeds had been below 40 miles per hour, so it was not that terrifying for her. That was then and this is now. She felt the car gaining speed, and as she felt the car swaying back and forth, she shut her eyes as hard as she could and felt the car starting to drift through the corner. Mira happily panning in the back seat, enjoying the ride. James took the first corner and felt his back tire slip off the track slightly, but he maintained control of the car. He would lose points for that, but he did not care. Jerry, the announcer, made a crack about the cows in the field being bored with James's driving ability. A chuckle went through the crowd of spectators. Both drivers made it through the next turn without further incident. The track straightened out, both cars gaining speed. Again, James began to rock the car side to side to get the momentum to drift through the next turn. Shyla had kept her eyes open on the second turn and no longer screamed. She held on for dear life, though. James took the turn perfectly. Next straightaway, he gained speed, rocked the car, and took the corner, barely missing the edge of the track. He kept right on his friend's car. The final turn was coming up, the final turn where the stands full of cheering people sat, watching the 2 cars battle it out. There was one more turn, and then the final one. James watched as his friend's car in front of him. Something caused Dean to lose control of his car on the turn, and he fully spun out, and his car came to a stop. James quickly avoided hitting his friend's car by a few inches. James did not stop. He knew he had to finish. He sped up on the straightaway, rocked the car back and forth, and slid the beast with many names through the final turn, hugging the safety wall, but not touching it, spraying the crowd with chunks of tire, sand, and smoke. He continued to drift until he lost speed and then straightened the car out. He could not hear the crowd cheering for him because of the loud engine and his wife laughing hysterically because she survived somehow. The loud rock music still playing. The crowd cheered and clapped. James slowed his car to a safe speed and drove his car off of the track and back to the pit area. James parked his car and turned the engine off. He flipped up his visor, his eyes reflecting the shit grin under his helmet. He turned to his wife. She likewise had flipped up her visor, her eyes wide. "I am not doing that ever again," she said breathlessly. "You maniac! I could have died!" She started to unbuckle herself. "But did you die?" James asked. "No," she said, pouting. "I thought so," he said. "You'll do it again." He added confidently, nodding to himself, beginning to unbuckle himself. They both watched as their friend Dean came rolling up and parked next to them. He looked okay from his spin out. Shyla opened the door and stood on shaky legs. She went to the back seat and began to unstrap Mira. James, taking his helmet off, went over to his friend and they gave each other a bro hug. "That was a sick ride," Dean said, pulling his helmet off, grinning. "We gotta do that again." James grinned. "We will. Maybe next time that piece of shit car you have can finish," he teased. "Fuck off," Dean said indignantly. The other drivers continued their drifting event, and the crowds could be heard cheering for them, and the announcer, Jerry, talking shit about the drivers, making fun of them. James sat back next to the beast with many names, drinking a cold beer, enjoying the evening. The burgers, cooking on the gas grill, were almost done and filled the air with their delicious smell. People walked by admiring the car and making small talk with the rock look-alike. James felt happy. He finally, after years of waiting, sweating, toiling, and working, he finally drifted his car. James realized his childhood dream.